For the August 7th primary. I'm Jerry Jacob. We are live at Willard High School in the auditorium of this beautiful campus here in Willard, Missouri. Tonight's going to be an interesting debate, an interesting forum, an interesting format for our debate, and it's brought to you by the Akin Foundation, a local political, nonpartisan political organization that is nonprofit. We put this debate on tonight, and we are covering it live from 7 to 9 here on the Ozark CW, also streaming it live on ky3.com, and it will be streamed live permanently on ky3.com for you to check it out later if you miss any part of tonight's program. Our panelists tonight, we're going to go ahead and introduce them first. Darren Chappell, first City Manager of Bolivar, longtime political science professor at Missouri State University and a local political figure in Southwest Missouri for years and years, and great to see you again, Darren. Thank you very much for being here. You're going to be covering the governing philosophy for our candidates. Thanks for being here. Darren Chappell, everyone. Next is the president of the Akin Foundation, Dr. John Lilly. You read his columns in the Springfield News Leader on a regular basis. He's a family physician with Mercy Clinics. And welcome very much. You're going to be covering healthcare for us. And I welcome Dr. John Lilly. And finally, the big Sammy, we call him around here, Dr. Jeff Baker, graduate of the class of '82, I believe. Class of '82 here at Willard High School. Now the president of the school board, and boy, may have done good. And economics professor, economics expert, the MBA from Wharton Schools, and Deutsche Bank on Wall Street. The list goes on and on. Your resume reads like a phone book. Jeff Baker, welcome. We really look forward to hearing a lot of economic questions tonight from you. Everybody welcome Jeff Baker. Format for tonight is the panelists are going to have about 30 minutes, a little more than 30 minutes to ask questions in their area of expertise. Again, the answer session is going to be as long as is needed. We're going to ask for the candidates to please limit their questions to the full answer, but no more. As soon as you start repeating yourself, our panelists are going to cut you off and move on to the next candidate so we can hear as much as we can from everybody. Other than that, the rules of good sportsmanship and manners apply here in this forum tonight, and I know they will be applied by. So we're going to begin with our introductions of the candidates, and begin with Mark Memley, a maximum of 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the folks at home. Mark Memley.
Good evening. My name is Mark Memley, and it's spelled M-E-M-O-L-Y, pronounced Memo-Lee. For information about our campaign, please go to memley.org. Our campaign is about creating a constructive dialogue, so at the end of the campaign, we have ideas that have been strengthened because of your input, so that we can build here in Missouri. We have a regular posting on Twitter, and our Twitter account is MMEMOLY. We regularly post to Facebook as well. On Facebook, it's ATV Trucks. And if you would, please get actively involved in this year's campaign, because it's important to our state and our nation. And with your involvement, our ideas will be solutions. Thank you very much for this time. Mark Memley.
Mark, thank you. I should mention that the order of introductions and from questions was chosen at random backstage by Dr. Lilly. Numbers on a card. Well done. And next is Sarah Steelman. Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Steelman, and I live in Rolla, Missouri. And I am running for United States Senate because I am very worried about our country and the direction it's headed. And everywhere I go, I talk to people who are also worried about whether their kids are going to have the same kind of future that we all did when we were growing up. And I want to make sure that they do. And unless we get things in Washington headed in a different direction, we're not going to do that. We've got people like Senator McCaskill and President Obama who have a philosophy of government that they think they know better than the rest of us. That they think government makes better decisions about our lives than we do, whether it's your child's education or health care, or your business, or property rights, or your farm. They think that government can do a better job at that. I think we can do better than that, and I know we can. And I'm going to work as hard as I can in this race because we owe it not only to our kids, but to all the people who went before us. And you know, this is Memorial Weekend coming up. And think about all the people who sacrificed their lives for our country, for our freedom. And there are people in Washington who are taking that away from us right now. I'm running for United States Senate because I'm going to do whatever I can to prevent that from happening. And my website is sarahsteelman.com, and that's Sarah with an H.
You got 2 minutes to use it, right? All right, Sarah, thank you very much. Next up, Congressman Todd Akin.
Good evening. I'm U.S. Congressman Todd Akin, and I'm on the Budget Committee. And when I take a look at the numbers, I am one more time convinced that freedom in America is under an attack unlike anything any of us have seen in our generation. My background's a little bit unusual for politics. I'm an engineer by training. I was an officer in the combat engineers in the Army. Later on, I worked for IBM and worked on productivity for various different businesses. Learned a lot about the private sector and the business world. And then I was in charge of over 2,000 people in a steel mill, labor unions, blue jeans, hard hats, different kind of job, in charge of maintenance in 7 mills. Now, since I've been in Congress, I've been rated the most conservative congressman in the state of Missouri. I would suggest to you, ever since Ronald Reagan, every Republican that runs says they're conservative. But I believe that what I have to offer in the U.S. Senate is a proven, principle-driven, conservative record. That record comes at cost. You make people mad when you say no to things, but that has been the hallmark of that generated that conservative record. I'm endorsed by Mike Huckabee. I think it was because of that principled conservative record, and have a bunch of different votes to back that up, some of them against Republican leadership. And overall, the situation in our country, as I said, is extremely serious, and I think that it's going to be not enough just to elect conservatives. I think all of us are going to have to be involved, and we're going to have to take back America. God bless you. I'm at Akin, AKIN.org. Thank you.
Well, normally the Marines are in the front, but luck of the draw, they're both in the back this time. John Bruner, you're next. Good evening.
Good to be with everybody. My name is John Bruner, and I've been married for 35 years. I'm up 36 here in June. I have 3 wonderful children, 6 great grandchildren. I was a former Marine Infantry Platoon Commander, Executive Officer. I served in the Mediterranean, North Atlantic, East Coast, West Coast. Learned some incredible leadership skills and principles when I served, and brought those same skills back to the small family business, a business that was started by my grandfather and grandmother in 1908 with $400, and I'd like to say no lawyers. I also spent time in the mission field. As part of my dad would always encourage me to put your faith in action. He spent time in Africa, the Philippines, Grenada, and other places. You know, folks, freedom is stuck in reverse, and we need a breakout strategy for jobs. One of the issues in our small family business was we were the go-to can-do. That's how we were able to compete against the big giants in our industry. You know, the critical issues is, number one, we got to make a budget, cut spending, and stick to it. I've done it for 30 years. We got to cut out the red tape, break up the gridlock, and simplify. I've done it for 30 years. And we need to return decision-making back to the people. It's the old way of cutting down the corporate headquarters to size, and I've done that for 30 years. You know, I'm grateful for the people that have come in to support this campaign, particularly Ron Johnson. He served for 31 years in a manufacturing family business, and now is in the U.S. Senate. Also, Senator Tom Coburn, a good business person and a medical doctor, fiscal conservative. Also, Freedom Works, the John Deere Corporation, Missouri Soybean, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but what counts for me most important is the endorsement and the votes of the people of Missouri. We got to get America working again, and I'm here to serve. Thank you.
And our 5th candidate on the panel tonight is Jerry Pack. Jerry, good evening.
Hello, my fellow Americans. Years ago, I served my nation honorably and proudly as a Special Forces United States Marine. And now I'm ready to serve my nation once again as a U.S. Senator in the state of Missouri. I see this destructive road we're traveling down, and we keep traveling down this road. Our children and grandchildren will be enslaved to the burden that this democratic system has imposed upon them. What we must do is bring jobs back to our small towns and restore our small towns and put our people back to work and take them off the back burner and put them on the front burner. We have sent 44,000 of our manufacturing plants overseas, and along with that, hundreds of thousands of small factories merged within those plants. We must start rebuilding and rebooting our manufacturing company in this nation so our people may have jobs. Thank you. I'm Jerry Beck. I attended the Northeast Missouri State Teachers College, now Truman University. My websites, I have 3 websites: Jerry Beck, politicalreview.com, newvoiceforthetimes.com, newvoicevideoproductions.com, Jerry Beck YouTube, Jerry Beck Facebook, Political, and Jerry Beck Twitter. And I'm honored to be here and speak in front of such a marvelous audience here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you again to all the candidates for being here tonight. We do appreciate it. On to our panel now. Darren Chappell is going to be covering governing philosophy. It's very important that senators know when they go in what they're going to be doing, and Darren's going to be covering that in depth. Again, there's no limit on the time for your answer, but as you answer, when you begin to repeat yourself, if that occurs, Darren, I'll encourage you to just come off and go to the next candidate. Darren Chappell.
Mr. Emily, there are 2 primary philosophies, and this is for all of you, but I'll start with Mr. Emily's answer. 2 primary philosophies regarding the role of a representative of the people in government. The first is the delegate, which suggests that as the voice of the people in Washington, D.C., you would follow the will of the people back home, regardless of whether or not you personally agreed with the determinations of the majority of your constituents, and that you would cast your votes as they would have you to do so. The second is the trustee, which implies that although following the will of the people back home, it is the responsibility to vote as the people would have you vote if they understood all of the issues to which a United States Senator is exposed, oftentimes things that are classified in nature. Realizing that your vote may be seen as a rejection of the will of the people back home if you act as a trustee instead of a delegate, which philosophy of representation will you embrace as a United States Senator from Missouri, and why?
I advocate the delegate position, and the reason being is we are representative government. If you're in Congress, the will of the people is paramount. I think it's incumbent upon any person that's a member of Congress, when they have information that they're privy to share that with citizens in a way that doesn't conflict with their responsibility of keeping intelligence. And I also think that when you convince people of why you've reached a decision, then you're able to easily be a delegate, because then people know why they should do something. And if you have an opportunity to go to some of the websites that we've developed, you'll see our reasoning. For example, for school scholarships, we know that people are looking to offset the high cost of tuition. That's why we offer a webpage known as onetime.us. It's that approach to say, here's a problem, here's an idea to solve it, and let's offer it to people to contribute. So I think the delegate position is the best one that I strongly advocate.
Thank you very much. Sarah, how would you answer this, delegate or trustee?
Well, I believe that we have a constitutional republic, and that means that I would advocate that I'm a trustee of the people. And, you know, if you believe and understand why the Constitution exists, it is to protect individual liberty in this country, the minority. And our founders believed in that, and I believe that the way that you do that is you have to understand and know and trust the person that you elect to the United States Senate. You know, you have an office, an oath of office that you have to uphold when you take that oath. And you have to swear to uphold the Constitution. And so in order to do that, that automatically, I think, makes you into the delegate. Not that you don't respect the will of the people, too, and that you need to listen to your constituents and make sure that you are understanding the different problems out there. But when you have to go and actually vote, you always have to keep in mind that you must protect those rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. And sometimes there's a conflict with that. Sometimes you have the majority and the will of the people that conflicts with the Constitution. And I believe you have to uphold the Constitution. I think part of the problem in Washington today actually is that we have too many delegates or with that mindset where they, just put their finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing, or they take a poll and they think, well, we got to do this or we got to do that. And that's why we have this mess in Washington today, is because no one is standing up and upholding the Constitution and the beliefs that our country was founded on, and that is a limited government. And protecting the minority, protecting individual rights. I'll give you two examples here in Missouri. Conceal and carry. I was in the legislature. I co-sponsored that bill, and we passed it in the legislature. That was after the will of the majority in Missouri voted it down. Now, I believe we have a constitutional right in the Second Amendment. That's one example where you have a split in what the majority did and what the legislature did. Another example was last year, or 2 years ago, with Prop B and the HSUS proposition that they wanted to come in and regulate puppy mills. And the majority of people in Missouri passed that. Thankfully, the legislature went in and fixed it, because that was spelled out. It actually violated people's constitutional rights in that they couldn't regulate their own property, their own pets. I think that's where you have to balance, again, the trustee with protecting the Constitution. And let me say one more thing about that. As a trustee, there is a relationship between the voters and the person they're voting for. And during this campaign, I've tried to make sure people know all about what I stand for. They can look at my record, my voting record. They can look at my record as state treasurer. And I have put out one policy proposal after another. I have an energy policy. I have a framework for national security. I have what I'm going to do in the first 60 days of office, solutions to, I believe, our economic problems. I put out what I call Sarah's commitment. It's a personal commitment to individual voters about how I'm going to behave in office. So I think that helps establish a trust between the people who are voting for you, so that they know you and they can trust you to make the decisions that are in the best interest of the people, and also uphold and protect those constitutional rights that are so near and dear to us.
Congressman Akin, delegate or trustee?
Darren, it would be trustee. If you go back to the days of the Pilgrims and Puritans, they had an awful big mouthful of tyrants and kings, and they had a very, very skeptical view of entrusting very much power to human beings. And so, almost in a paranoid fashion, they made what a lot of us have learned about the horizontal and vertical checks and balances, the executive, legislative, and judicial, in terms of the federal level, and then federal, local, and state. So all of these things were designed to compartmentalize power and to protect freedom. And in one of the things that's not mentioned in that list is the role of a senator or a congressman or a legislator. And that is that they are to use their best judgment and to put principle over politics. And that is one of those forms of checks and balances. The founders were really down on the idea of democracy. They despised it because they understood the danger of a rabble getting all excited about something and not knowing all the facts and going off half-cocked and doing the wrong thing. And that's why the trustee was very much central to the checks and balances system. And I've always believed that way, because of my study of the founders A couple of examples, No Child Left Behind by President Bush, very first bill, first time in Congress. And I believe in the principle of local control of schools. And what did this do? It gave more money and more power to the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And I don't think we need those bureaucrats. In fact, I don't think we need the Department of Education when you get right down to it. So I voted no. And then another example would be there was the Wall Street bailout. This is a great big deal. And you don't really know for sure how all of this macroeconomics is going to come off. But, and everybody was saying, all of the establishment was saying, you've got to do this or the economy is going to melt down and all that kind of stuff. My biggest contributor said, you are going to vote for this thing or I'll never talk to you again. It was one of my biggest contributors. And I thought about the little letters I get from different widows, a little piece of pink paper with a rose that says, Congressman Akin, I trust you. I'm leaving you $5 for my Social Security, And I voted no on that then. And that wasn't exactly the popular thing to do, and it went against my own political party. But I think you always have to put principle over politics. And I found that when you do that, people find that you're predictable and they like it because they know you're not making deals. But I think Sarah makes a good point, and that is coming with this is the responsibility for us to be transparent. I've told you, I'm rated the most conservative congressman in the state of Missouri. If I do anything other than conservative, you got a big right to complain. Otherwise, don't complain at all. Thanks.
Mr. Berner.
Trustee, this is a very interesting and stimulating question, the debate between delegate and trustee, and it caused me to do a little research in the area here, and I was impressed with Edmund Burke when he talked about exercising your own judgment and the importance of a trustee to exercise judgment. Of course, that requires individuals to have life-changing experiences and a strong background experience to bring to the table. And of course, it was a little bit humorous to learn that Edmund Burke lost the very next election, going from a delegate to a trustee position. But I thought it was interesting because what are the challenges of a trustee? And what special trust do you have? As a trustee, the real question to be asked is, who are you working for? Are you working for yourself? Are you working for the voters? Or are you working for the special interest, the political party, the corporate sponsor, the aspect of earmarks that go in to that aspect of corporate sponsors? And so I zeroed in on the concept of focusing on exercising your own judgment. And I started with the last word, judgment. And I said, again, that's a lifetime of career experiences, established constitutional conservative principles, all of these things coming together. What is your experience in terms of actually working in the economy, in terms of creating jobs, creating opportunities? Are you a free enterprise veteran? All of these life experiences help to weigh in on an individual's judgment on very complicated issues that come in. And back to own judgment. Not own or beholding to a political party or establishment is absolutely critical. In terms of own judgment, not in with the big money interest. The big money interest could be unions or big businesses. And when you drill down there, not being owned by any special interest. Whether it's government suppliers, and that ties into the problem with earmarks, or with trial lawyers, that ties into tort reform, or maybe personal financial interest, and this comes back to the area of insider trading, which Congress has attempted to solve in the most recent past. So these issues here are so critical, and that's why as voters, with the concept of a trustee, who are you going to put your trust into? Number one, what is their motivation to go to Washington, D.C., or fill any public office for that matter? And number two, what are those career experiences and backgrounds that they bring to Washington, D.C., so when those tough issues come into play, that they'll have that frame of reference to deal with that and be able to put mature judgment based on years of practical applied experience. Of course, John Stuart Mill also weighed in this issue of trustee, said, a person whose desires and impulses are their own is said to have character. And that is absolutely critical. And especially in these very difficult and tough times, we have to look very carefully at those that we put in their sacred trust to go to Washington, D.C. to represent us, and they should represent us as trustees with the ability to exercise their own judgment.
Thank you. Mr. Beck, same question. Delegate or trustee form of representation that you intend to embrace?
First, I, Jerry Beck, believe that truth is not actually defined, the deception and misrepresentation will always carry the day. And society will be collusively regulated as a special interest project of those who pander after wealth and power. Therefore, I respectfully disagree with the assumption that there are only two primary philosophies regarding representation of the people. First, the delegate has to be the delegate of truth and justice, reason and logic, that represents his or her perspective and objective in the process of being elected. The perspective and objective then has to be that which is represented in the free enterprise system of life and industry and the enable individual human rights of man and the unshackled ownership of private property. Therefore, the delegate can never violate these basic principles of life and industry, which necessitates an honest evaluation of that he or she in government. If the people themselves want dishonest and hypocritical representation that supports some sort to collect this agenda, then the candidate should never be elected or present themselves as a candidate. This will solve many problems of the day. America's founding heritage was not founded on any kind of collective scheme, but on the individual and the free enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say just one thing very quickly. Ms. Thielman and I had offices right down the hall from each other at Missouri State, and I'm sorry I was overly familiar and called you by your first name. I apologize. I call everybody else Mr. or Congressman, and I'm sorry.
Oh, please call me Sarah.
You're very, we work right down the hall from each other. It's really hard for me not to say hi, Sarah. So anyway, but I didn't mean to single you out, and I apologize. Okay. Very quickly, in 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified to alter the Constitution of the United States in the way in which the senators for the states were actually elected. Prior to 1913, they were selected by state legislatures, and they were individuals that simply went to, in the case of Missouri, Jefferson City, and petitioned state legislatures and state senators to appoint them as state senators on behalf of the state. It wasn't until 1913, as I said, after the ratification of the 17th Amendment, that senators were elected by popular vote. This did dramatic things to change the political landscape in which we currently exist. First of all, it took power away from the state governments themselves and it focused power even more strongly in Washington, D.C. Secondarily, it caused individuals to begin to run campaigns statewide and have to spend great sums of money, as I know that you all are well aware, in order to be able to have your names and your positions in front of the millions of people of the state of Missouri, rather than as congressmen, relatively small districts, or as it was before, simply the legislature itself. Another thing that it did was that it gave double representation to the people. Originally, the founders envisioned that the Senate would be the House representing the states, and that the House of Representatives would be the House representing the will of the people. And if you could get the representatives of the people and the representatives of the states and the president to sign on to a bill, that was probably pretty necessary legislation. So my question to you all is, do you favor a repeal of the 17th Amendment? Why or why not? Mr. Mendel.
No, I do not favor the repeal of electing or selecting U.S. senators by the state legislature. And the reason being is the purpose of a U.S. senator, as I see it, is to represent statewide interests. And with that, states will be heard in the U.S. Senate. One of the things that concerned me was the budget vote that was taken, that was 99-0. After the U.S. Senate, with their trusting relationship, established a super committee so that we could come up with a budget. And at the end of the day, nothing was done. There was a 99-0 vote. When people are looking for Congress to provide a business climate where we could build, that was really disappointing. In my opinion, the U.S. Senate is the saucer that cools the tea. In other words, with our terms, the Congress elected every 2 years, Senator elected every 6 years, an informed judgment says, hey, you'll be able to go to the people and explain something in a way that you're not just concerned about the very next election. And some crucial votes have to be taken by our U.S. Senate. One is, how are we going to build? What are we going to build? So I'm very much in favor of having the people elect the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. That was the answer to your question, right? Okay. Ms. Steele. Sarah.
No, I would not favor the repeal of the 17th Amendment. I think, today we have a highly technical society, technological society. I think people can get around and use the internet and use all the tools that are available to us to get information out to people. I do want to say I respect, of course, the 10th Amendment, which keeps power at the state level. And I think that we have drifted too far from that, and they have too much of a centralized government, far too much of a centralized government in Washington, which is not what the founders had in mind. However, I do believe that a U.S. senator needs to be voted on by the entire population of Missouri. The legislature could sometimes act like, kind of like a good old boys network, excuse my phraseology. But, so in order to make sure that everybody is being represented in the state of Missouri, all kinds of interests are being factored in. I think that was good to have the 17th Amendment so that people can vote on that. I don't think that in today's society we need that security anymore. I think times have changed and it's better this way.
Okay, thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and I haven't jumped up and down and taken a firm position on it. I think, in general, I have a very serious concern about erosion of states' rights, very serious concern of that, and reversing this decision might pull that balance back. I am, as I've mentioned, a strong conservative. I don't think the federal government should be doing a whole lot of things that it's doing. And it may well be that a repeal of the 17th Amendment might tend to pull that back, but I haven't written any thesis on it or anything like that. I do know a little of the history about it, though, Darren. I don't know if you do this, but Missouri played a very significant role in getting the 17th Amendment passed. And it was a little bit of a scuffle that occurred in the Missouri Senate. It seems that they had to select a senator by 12 o'clock, and they couldn't quite agree, and it started as just a strong disagreement. Then they threw some of their inkwell bottles at each other, and then somebody was trying to turn the hands of the clock back and brought in a ladder, which was then thrown through a window, and general fisticuffs ensued. And that was then covered in the media, and Missouri was not necessarily good looking in this whole, was part of the decision of the public to go with the 17th Amendment. But I'm very concerned about states' rights, and if I were to lean one way or the other, it would be leaning in going back to repeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruner.
Thank you. At this particular time in history, with all the tough issues that are facing us, we have to face those issues that are most critical for Missourians in our country. We have a debt, and we have jobs, we have crises all around us. So, on one hand, from a very practical point of view, that's not on the top of my list. But from an academic standpoint, I'm highly sympathetic to the whole concept of the 17th Amendment and the idea of doing whatever we can to bring the power back to the people, decentralize the control, the 10th Amendment, and the concept about exercising good judgment is absolutely critical in terms of finding, in this particular case, a good Senate candidate. And who are the best people that can get the job done? And your discussion and argument really hit home, because as a first-time person coming into this political theater here, trying to bring my experience and background and everything to the people of Missouri, it's a very arduous task, a lot of hard work. And I tell you, every place I go, it is a resounding empathy, and we connect, we understand, but it's a big state, and it's expensive to get around, and it's difficult to provide that opportunity for the citizen senator, the citizen legislator, the citizen to come forward and say, you know, I have skills and backgrounds and experiences that can be of help, and then be able to carry that message across the entire state of Missouri and connect with everybody in that regard. But you know what? Even with the 17th Amendment, the purpose hasn't changed. And the purpose is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. You know, it's the same oath of office that I took as a young Marine Corps infantry officer. And of course, we can also help this whole concept in terms of the idea of term limits. Or, for those that run for office, put their own self-imposed term limits. You know, these are the ideas that we need to generate here in terms of bringing good government back closer to the people, as well as getting good citizens involved in the political process. And I think while we have a tougher challenge now, and the hurdles are tough for somebody new in the process, I think with the right tenacity, the right hard work ethic, and the right support, and the right message, and the right person, we can still get the job done of having somebody in Washington, D.C. that can exercise good judgment.
All right, Mr. Beck.
First of all, 17th Amendment is a very good amendment, and I believe Washington, D.C. has way too much power. They're using the power. It should be turned back to the states and the community. But above all, a senator, if elected, should not support, no matter the enticing payoff for any type of legislation and special interest policy that promotes industrial genocide and sends our basic industry to other nations. It has to be understood that entitlement legislation is economic plunder in some way, shape, or form, and will eventually destroy personal wealth and a nation's basic social, political, and economic structure and bounty. If a candidate is elected under such an understanding, then no matter the nature and intent of any so-called classified material, then the candidate should never violate his or her personal basic principles and support any type of un-American or collusive special interest legislation that violates national sovereignty. These types of schemes are always presented as some type of so-called national security policy. In other words, an individual should never violate inalienable rights, free enterprise, or the unshackled ownership of private property in some favor or some entitlement legislation, as the past has so insidiously represented. And as a Special Forces United States Marine, I took an oath to uphold the 17th Amendment and all the other amendments in this nation. And I'm sure that every other Special Forces United States Marine has done the same thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much, appreciate that. One other real quick question. We've got a few minutes, so but relatively quickly and directly, if you could, please. American federalism is the relationship between the national and the state governments. It's unique. There is no other form of government like it on the face of the earth. One Supreme Court justice suggested that American federalism was akin to splitting the sovereignty atom. And it's that weighing between the national and the state levels of where power resides that is the crux of almost every question that comes before the people when they vote, but also the representatives, the senators, the presidency, and the Supreme Court justices when any issue is being determined. The 10th Amendment proclaims that those powers not granted specifically to the United States government by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, those powers are retained by the states and the people respectively. What would you do, and I'm asking you please to be very specific, what would you do to uphold and enforce American federalism as the United States Senator from the state of Missouri? Mr. Mayor.
May I call you Darren? I wouldn't uphold federalism in the fact that indicates that power should be taken away from the states and the people. I'm a 10th Amendment Republican. I believe too many issues have been taken over by Congress, forcing the issues into federal courts. So anybody that wants programs to be taken over by the federal government, you're giving up your rights. And we should not do that. Now, what do? Instead? We align objectives. In other words, when you're a legislator or a state senator from Missouri, you could inform your representatives in Congress of what you're hearing and receiving from constituents so that the people in Congress could get work done. And that's the biggest complaint that I hear from people is, what's being done? Congress has a 90% approval rate. When we have aligned objectives, the people know what has to be promoted in Congress and what gets represented.
We're very short on time, so very, very quickly. Sarah.
I would start cutting the budget to begin with, and either returning that money to the states and letting them keep it and administer whatever program it is if the states so desire. I think we need to start repealing laws that went way beyond the bounds of what the federal government is supposed to do. They've overstepped their boundaries time and time again. One thing I'm calling for in my economic plan is a moratorium on all rules and regulations. And where do those rules and regulations come from? They come from Congress, who votes the authority for those. And so I think we need to look at those and start repealing these statutes that have allowed the bureaucracies to overstep the boundaries time and time again of the federal government. And by doing so, you'll begin to move power back to the people, retained by the people or the states. And then you have to be very vigilant about what's happening every second. What we have seen happen in Washington has happened over a long period of time, incrementally taking away our freedom by Congress. And we've let it happen to us, and we cannot let that happen anymore. So it goes beyond just voting the right way. If I'm in the United States Senate, I'm going to be out there working and taking the initiative to make sure that we get these things corrected and that the power is returned to the states and that the power is not taken again going into the future from the people in the state.
Thank you. Congressman.
Yeah, Darren, you talk about making my day here. That Constitution would be a very nice yardstick to start figuring out how we're going to balance the budget. We start with anything that's unconstitutional and pitch it out. I'm going to up the ante on Sarah for rules and regulations and laws. Let's get rid of some departments. Get rid of the Department of Energy, Education, Commerce. Let's basically restart EPA. And then the second thing is, every single bill that comes up should have a front page explaining why is it constitutional. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got 2 minutes. Mr. Bruner.
Okay, the whole issue is in terms of where does the power reside, and it resides in the people. And for centuries, if not generations, for many civilizations, there's always been a tendency for the power to go back to the executive branch, to the king. We need people who represent the people that will take back the power. Obviously, the power of the purse is there, the legislative power. You need people in Washington, D.C. who will go in there and fight for those issues.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beck.
As a U.S. Senator, I will work feverishly to help President Romney redo the basic infrastructure in our nation. First of all, we must start with our community, our state, and the people, to turn back the power to them, because the federal government has abused the power and they're making laws and regulations and they're not even following the Constitution or our Bill of Rights. We've got to get back to what our founding fathers did. George Washington said once, don't get entangled with foreign nations, and we better take advice from him, because that's gonna hurt us.
Thank you all very much.
Darren Chapman, thank you for enlightening us all on a lot of issues that we just don't sit around and talk around the dinner table very often. Pretty deep subjects, but subjects that are very important to someone who's going to want to be the next senator from Missouri in the United States Senate. When we come back, we're going to talk healthcare with Dr. John Lilly. president of the Lockett Smith Foundation, when this Lockett Smith Foundation political forum continues here on the Ozark CW and KY3.com.